Good morning, everyone. My name's Will. I'm one of the pastors here, and on an exciting day like this, it would be silly of me to do a long sermon, so I'm going to do a short thought on Ezekiel this morning. And we're in week 2 of our series in Ezekiel. Last week, we met Ezekiel, a prophet in 593 BC who grew up in Jerusalem, but had then been exiled from the city for 5 years. This exile not only removed him from the city, but it removed these people from the presence of God in the temple. It removed him and moved him to Babylon, sitting by the river for 5 years, wondering where God was, if God still cared about them. It was on his 30th birthday, he had this vision from God in front of him. It was incredible. He saw these creatures with wings and fire and faces and a throne, and on that throne was sitting the one who appeared to be God. It was his vision reminding them that God had remembered them, that God was there. He was with them in exile in Babylon. However, he was there in judgment, wasn't he? It wasn't a message of hope. And he actually had a job for Ezekiel, and that job was to take this very message of judgment to his own people. It was a terrifying role, a daunting role, but Ezekiel took it on. He said yes to this call and became God's messenger, a prophet. And today we explore the second vision that Ezekiel has. We see it in Ezekiel 8 to 11, and as it begins in chapter 8, Ezekiel is transported by the Spirit from exile in Babylon to Jerusalem. It actually says the Spirit picked him up by his hair and moved him. It's not a very comfortable way to travel. Ezekiel's taken to Jerusalem because God wants him to see what is happening in the city. And he wants Ezekiel to hear and see what God's response is so that he can take that message to the other exiles. So he can share everything that he's learnt and seen with them. In chapter 9, we see what Ezekiel sees. Verse 9 says this. That's not verse 9. Where am I? Raj, could you put verse 9 up for me? Thanks, mate. It says, "The sin of the people of Israel and Judah is exceedingly great. The land is full of bloodshed and the city is full of injustice." So the city is full of death and destruction, of bloodshed and injustice. People not treating each other as they should, as God wants them to. People are treating others with contempt and disregard. There's not love for each other, there's disregard for each other. And throughout this vision, you see in chapter 8 in particular, God shows Ezekiel many examples of this. And then Ezekiel hears what God is going to do in response. In verse 10, that is verse 10, sorry, clicker problems. "So I will not look on them with pity or spare them, but I will bring down on their own heads what they have done." So Ezekiel sees God judge the people and this city, and God says, "I will not take pity. I will not spare them. What they've done, well, it has consequences. What they've chosen, he will actually bring upon their own heads." And in fact, this judgment doesn't just impact the city and its inhabitants, it also concerns the very presence of God himself. This judgment has consequences with the people's relationship with God and the very presence of God in their life, where he chooses to dwell, where his presence can live. And in chapter 10, we see this play out because the presence of God begins to move. It begins to rise and it begins to leave. Chapter 10 verse 4 says, "Then the glory of the Lord rose from above the cherubim and moved to the threshold of the temple." Now the threshold of the temple is an important place because in the temple you've got the inner court, the center of it, which is the Holy of Holies, the divine place where the presence of God dwells. And outside of that is where humans could actually go and worship God. And the threshold is the wall between the two. It's the space which is separating the divine from the human. And it's saying here that this is an image of this threshold being crossed as God's presence rises and rests upon it. And in chapter 10:18, the presence moves from the threshold of the temple and it stops at the entrance gate. Now at the gate of the temple, the entrance of a temple as a whole, God's glory is there sitting on the edge, contemplating leaving, almost seeing if there's a chance, a final opportunity to stay. As we jump ahead to chapter 11, verse 23, the glory of the Lord does leave. There is no space for God in his own temple anymore. It says it's moved by the Spirit away from the temple and it settles on the mountain to the east of the city, the Mount of Olives. Ezekiel's image is full of other things. He sees the cherubim again, the wings and the fire, but the focus, the main point of this vision as a whole is that the glory of God has left the temple. So this is unimaginable for the people of Jerusalem. This is unimaginable for Ezekiel who is here. And one of the key reasons why it was so unimaginable was and terrifying was because it was common ancient Near East knowledge that a city could not be captured, a city could not be destroyed unless its gods were defeated, unless the gods actually abandoned that city. And so here, as Ezekiel watches the glory of the Lord depart, it's not just a moment where he sees this happen, it's a terrifying moment because he's watching the one who is protecting this city, whose presence was a source of hope for this city, leave. And it means they're now vulnerable and open. They're vulnerable to being invaded or captured or destroyed by invading armies. God leaves the people open. And so the question you're probably asking is, but why has God departed? The answer, the reason is because of the choices God's people have made. The choices that God's people have made have driven God from his temple. They've broken the relationship, the covenant relationship that God had with them. We see this in chapter 11, verses 1-3. It says this: "Then the Spirit lifted me up and brought me to the gate of the house of the Lord that faces east. There at the entrance of the gate were 25 men, and I saw among them Jazaniah son of Azur and Pelatiah son of Benaiah, leaders of the people. The Lord said to me, 'Son of man, these are the men who are plotting evil and giving wicked advice in this city. They say, haven't our houses been recently rebuilt? This city is a pot and we are the meat in it.'" In this passage, Ezekiel is taken to the gate of the temple, the one where the glory of the Lord is dwelling above. And not that these men in the passage seem to notice. And there's 25 of these men there, and they're discussing building projects, rebuilding and building houses. That's where their mind is. And then they quote this proverb at the end there, that the city is a pot and we are the meat in it. And it doesn't make much sense to us. But it's an ancient Israel proverb describing a safe place to be. Because the best cuts of the meat were cooked in a pot on the fire. They'd boil them, and the poorer cuts, the poorer pieces, would be fried on the open fire or discarded altogether. Now, there's a bunch of South Africans here. Imagine you invited someone round to a braai and then you boiled the meat in a pot. It'd be horrible, wouldn't it? So we don't understand this image, but that's what it meant for them. It's like a reverse barbecue. The good bits were boiled, but we want the good bits fried on the open flame. And these leaders, the 25 men, are seeing themselves as the best bits, as the prime cuts. They're the ones who are gloating and proudly proclaiming that they are the ones who are safe in the pot. They will be the ones who will survive. They will be the ones who survive with their privilege still intact. They see themselves as safe. In fact, they see Jerusalem as safe. Now, to this group, the offcuts, the poorer cuts, well, they were the people who were in exile, including Ezekiel. To them, their offcuts are the poorer or ordinary people. People who've probably suffered from their greediness, their selfishness, their violence as they dispossessed others. And in verse 6, God accuses these men, saying, "You have killed many people in this city and filled its streets with the dead." We said that these men are at the east gate where the glory of God is, and they haven't noticed. They're oblivious to the danger that they are now in. They're oblivious to the presence of God actually dwelling with them and above them. They're oblivious to the presence of God now departing from them as well. And this is the heart of why God is driven from his temple. The people, his people, they're unaware of him and his presence. Why? Well, because they're so focused on themselves and the other things that they've placed above God. Those things more important to them in this world. And these things that are placed above God are what we call idols. Tim Keller said this about idols: an idol is anything more important to you than God. It's when a good thing, such as a relationship, career, or success, becomes an ultimate thing. Something you can't imagine living without. When a good thing becomes an ultimate thing. And we can see for those left in Jerusalem that the good thing that's become the ultimate thing is their homes, it's their safety, it's their security, it's their status, their security, their comfort, their. It's their selfishness. It's their self-absorption. It's how life has become all about them. This fixation on themselves, this life lived for themselves. And this life has actually pushed God away. There's no room for him anymore. They're living this life which says, "I don't need you, God." Their hope is in their safety. Their hope is in their security. Their hope is in their house and their wealth and their comfort, and the list goes on. They've dethroned God. They've removed him from his rightful place. And it means that God no longer has a place. And so he departs. He honors their decision. He responds to their choices. But what the people don't realize, that the unintended consequences of their actions, of their choices, is that the city and their lives are now vulnerable and open. They will now be judged, and Jerusalem will be destroyed. And there's a lesson for us here, I think. There's something we ought to take away from what we read, and that is that idolatry is just as dangerous for us. Idolatry being when a good thing becomes an ultimate thing, we have the propensity to make good things ultimate. It can even be in our family and relationships, finding our worth and security in them. It might be our career and our achievements, success and recognition defining our value. It might be money and possessions, financial security or material comfort becoming the foundation of our life. It might be romantic love, needing this affirmation from others which takes God's place. It might be power and influence, where we want to control people and circumstances, and this becomes the ultimate thing in our life. It might be freedom and autonomy, being independent, which leads us to reject God's authority. Good things can become ultimate things for us. And when they become ultimate, they replace God. They dethrone God. They remove God from his rightful place. We remove God from our lives. We push his presence away. We decide to go our own way, and then we become open and vulnerable. Not for invasion or being captured like in Ezekiel, but we become open to be utterly consumed by these things, to be overtaken by them, and to ultimately be let down by them. And then we can find ourselves feeling distant from God, feeling like he's not there, that God doesn't care, that God isn't with us, as though we're in our own exile, far from God, removed from his presence. Maybe even we think that we are too far gone. And we feel like crying out what Ezekiel says in 11:13 when he says, "Alas, sovereign Lord, will you completely destroy the remnant of Israel?" His cry is this: God, is there any hope? Is there any hope at all for any of your people? Yet come back to this passage with me. Let's read 11:17 to 19 and see the message that God gives Ezekiel to give to those in exile. This is what the sovereign Lord says: I will gather you from the nations and bring you back from the countries where you have been scattered, and I will give you back the land of Israel again. They will return to it and remove all its vile images and detestable idols. I will give them an undivided heart and put a new spirit in them. I will remove from them their heart of stone and give them a heart of flesh. What is this a glimmer of in the midst of this message of judgment? It's a glimmer of hope. It's a message of hope that while Jerusalem is endangered, while they are open and vulnerable, God will give the exiles a sanctuary. It's a message of hope that while God feels distant and seems far away, he will gather them again. There's a promise, there's a hope that God is going to give them this undivided heart, this new spirit to live in them. There's a hope that God will remove that heart of stone, a heart which is against God and void of life, and give them this new heart, this heart of flesh which beats life again. It's this message that says God desires to be in relationship with his people. God desires for all of humanity to know him, to experience his love, to know and understand his grace. It's this beautiful glimmer of hope in what is a dark situation for Ezekiel, Jerusalem, and the exiles. But there is this glimmer of hope. And at times we miss it. There's this hope there for us available, but we put other things above God. We forget our Creator and Sustainer. We miss his presence in our life. We don't spend time in his word. Yet the hope here for the exiles and the hope here for you and for me is that God never forgets you. God is always ready to welcome you home, to help you take the idols off the throne and to seat him in his rightful place again. The message here is that God is willing, waiting, and wanting to give you a new heart. While we may have gone our own way, he'd love to be in relationship with you again. He'd love to welcome you home. He loves you, he's for you, and he's waiting for you to return.